So we're at PlatCon today. I'm joined by David O'Dwyer, friend of the show. If you haven't caught the VMware Takeout series, do go and grab that. So PlatCon is all about enabling consumers of technology in an organization to consume that technology easily to enable the business goals. Now, if we think back to about 2018, I would be on booths with Chef explaining what DevOps was. And what I'm seeing at PlatCon is a similar sort of thing where everyone who goes up and talks about what platform is has their own definition of what that platform goal is, which really goes to show that we're open to different ideas. And although they're all pulling in the same direction, you've got this idea of who's the primary beneficiary of the work of the platform team. Is it for the developers? Do they line up into the CTO, as we saw with the like of Sixt, or are they lining up under the CIO, where perhaps there's more of a cost-centric view on what the goals of that part of the organization are? So that difference there I find fairly interesting. What struck me talking to people, lots of coffee breaks, lots of good snacks, well done on that, and the talks as well have been top notch, is the amount of Kubernetes that's being used. And by that, I don't necessarily mean the scale, like the number of workloads, but the number of clusters organizations are using. So I was speaking to a monitoring company who are here, and they had hundreds and hundreds of Kubernetes clusters. And you might think that, are there all those needed? But then they need to manage that with policies. So we've got to follow up with Kubernetes to go and talk to them about how we can help with that. And it's very similar to the proliferation of accounts in public cloud. We used to have a single account. That became very difficult from a FinOps perspective. It became very risky from a security perspective. It became very difficult to manage the blast radius and limitations that happen in, say, AWS. You can only have so many VPCs, for example. So that pattern has now very much come into Kubernetes, and people want that autonomy to do their own thing, and then the autonomy of a team to do their own thing collectively. As you try and develop faster, you need more environments. You need a validation environment that's integrated, so it goes off into all those other parts of the business. But before you get to that, people want to develop in their own spaces as well. So there was a round table last night where 30 people got around a round table. Sounds very sort of knightish. And they all started discussing what the platform needs are and where it's going. And you had some interesting points, David, about what was really on their minds.
Yeah, so I think one of the primary talking points, which might surprise some people, was AI. Surprising. But it was around how the use of AI from a developer experience is changing the needs from a platform. There seem to be these two opposing views around, are we still at the infancy of building platforms and what we're doing at the moment is still the right steps, or are we misaligning ourselves to what developers actually want, which is better and firmer integration with their local AI toolchain? And I think one of the other pressing points that was made last night is the need for how to manage and validate what's happening in this space. So within the sort of traditional platform space, you have very clear APIs, very clear specs, very clear services. You're centralizing those services, you're publishing them. There's very well-worked interfaces and processes associated to them. Once you're moving into the new sort of agentic AI experience for developers, there's a lot of variance in how the tools are potentially are interacting with your tooling, unless you're providing them a curated experience. And I think there was a lot of questions of how companies are going to provide that curated experience and getting consistent results when you take it to teams using AI on scale.
Coda were on stage today, and they're all about developer experience and developing cloud and the control that comes with that. They also talked a lot about agentic AI and restricting an AI agent to a PID on a Linux, runtime, and that's some of the safeguards there. So, this idea of the AI escaping. If you haven't seen the Diary of a CEO with the godfather of AI. I recommend any technologist go and check that out. It was a fascinating discussion. But yeah, they're thinking about how to make sure it doesn't get out. Then you have this idea of models that are outside of your context that you maybe don't want to send things off to because they're public and you don't have full control of what's happening. And then those internally hosted models of things that have been built on your own infrastructure with your own data. RAG might play a part in that to make sure it's got that context and it can make those decisions. I got talking to the CTO of Coda after the talk, and we were discussing, the role of testing in future. And we were talking earlier, right, about in this context where AI is able to do more, we have to then build the barriers that it works within, confines, that sort of thing. But really, that's no different to how we work with teams of people today who are fallible, forgetful, very innovative. So I think a lot of those processes will adapt and will adopt some of the similar practices. But of course, the scale that it can happen at, the speed that it can happen at, are much more. So how that space will change is going to be a fascinating thing. I do think we'll probably see more architects controlling what's going on rather than implementing specifically.
This is another area where it's moving out of a lot of architects and a lot of technologists' comfort zone. And a lot of the concepts and constructs that AI is bringing to infrastructure architecture development doesn't necessarily feel very intuitive. And it does remind me of back when Kubernetes first came onto the scene. And I know a number of people who worked in infrastructure, they're very used to, they've got their automation, they're applying their automation, they have a target, they know where it's going, they're applying it, and it's very much more controlled and measured. And suddenly they're moving into a space where they're presenting the concept of deploy this for me. They're handing over control. They're no longer deploying it to a specific instance. They're saying, system, do this for me, converge on this end state. And that was a big comfort zone shift for a lot of technologists. And I feel the same thing about with AI. It's the next level of that where you're handing over control to another system. There is obviously a world of difference between a known scheduler with very lots of preset rules and AI models, which there is a lot of variance. So I think what I'm looking for is how do you get that same sort of structure and validation? How can you provide the guardrails to what this is doing? And it seems to be a common discussion that's happening throughout the conference. It's a similar conversation that was happening last night, is how do you provide that sort of structured, unified experience?
Great. Well, thanks for listening. We'll see you again.
Thank you.